you considered inviting like city council to visit?
We've started with the county commissioners to try and see if they come in and they see how inadequate our facilities are, maybe we could bump that 9% up a little bit. But I do agree, that would be just a really good way to get the ball rolling.
I have a different question.
Okay.
So you said that cat population is a concern in Lake Tahoe County, but as I understand it, certainly compared to maybe what it was in the past, the stray dog population is really not very high in our region. And in fact, you often don't have a lot of dogs available for adoption. And so I don't know if you can speak to that. I've heard that you kind of need a critical mass of dogs to attract people to your shelter, to make sure it's an option for them when they're thinking of adopting. I don't know if that's true or not, but I mean, if there is space, are you thinking about ways to house other dogs, even if they're not from Lake Tahoe County?
Oh, definitely. So we're on the list for other shelters that they can transport dogs to us when they have an overabundance. And there's a great organization called Wings of Rescue, and they'll pull dogs from shelters that have to euthanize, and they'll bring them to no-kill shelters. So we're on the list to get these dogs. One of the hard parts is that a lot of the shelters that have the overabundance are down in the south. And so getting them transported up to Idaho, we're kind of last on the list. So they hit the shelters closer to them first, and then eventually the dogs will move this way. But it's really difficult moving dogs across state line from other shelters without a health certificate. So a lot of times transfers, if they're a kill shelter, it can be difficult to convince them that we need to have that health certificate, especially if they're coming from the south, because we don't want to bring things like heartworms up to Idaho. That would be pretty scary. And so we are on the list, but so far we have not had any transfers. But we've been offering our assistance now for about 12 months, so hopefully we'll start to see more dogs coming in.
Do you have any relationship with the shelters in like Spokane, just larger population centers where they might just end up with more dogs?
So Sierra has contacted them. We've filled out all the paperwork, so now we are just waiting for the need for the dogs to come down. But we've been reaching out to more locally, like Spokane and Seattle, just to see if maybe we can help when they have an overabundance.
If I might, everybody else now. So I was surprised that the return rate for microchip pets was as low as it is. I mean, it's encouraging that it's so much better than the non-chipped animals, but when we had our pets microchipped, the companies that promote that would have you believe that they have a 90% return rate.
Yeah.
Like, why is it that that number isn't higher than, would you say 58?
So for dogs, it is 52%.
52
Yeah.
and 20 something for cats.
So one of the reasons I think that is chips only work if they're registered and up to date. We have quite a few animals come in that are microchipped that their registration is a dead end. And so we can call a number that's maybe disconnected or send an email to an email address that's no longer being checked. So a lot of it is, I think, there just needs to be a little bit more public education about, it doesn't stop at having them chipped. You also have to make sure it's up to date and registered with your current information. And we also run into, there are a lot of different chip companies now. When I first started working at the shelter, there was maybe one or two. And so I think with the abundance of companies, sometimes I think people don't realize that we can't just go online and track them down. And it's not a GPS, that unless it's registered up to date and it's a chip company that we can actually find and get a hold of, it can be really difficult to track down the original owner. But one of the ways that we get around that is if we can't find the owner, we'll call the chip company back and ask where it was implanted. Goodness, that was a tough one. So that then we can contact that facility and see if they maybe have more up-to-date records, which doesn't usually happen, but sometimes we are successful that way. Did that answer your question?
Oh, it does. it's just kind of frustrating, and it's a fairly expensive thing to continue to keep your pets up to date through these private companies. It seems like having a central repository for all this data would be helpful
It
in
would
some
be
way.
very helpful. And another thing that's different from back in 2004 is there weren't yearly memberships.
Mhm.
It was you got your animal microchipped, and then you could just keep it up to date. I'm very disheartened by the fact that now companies will charge a $90 annual fee to keep your animal registered, or a $25 fee. That, to us, is an entire adoption. And, you know, if it's $80 to keep your pet up to date, you could be adopting a cat for that. Like, it's very unfortunate, I feel, that that has become the new thing that chip companies do.
So Tara, if you don't pay the yearly subscription, if you were to scan it, so like my cats, I don't pay yearly subscription on.
Sure.
They don't get out, but they're chipped. If you were to scan their chip, what would it say?
So
Nothing?
it would still pop up with the number.
Okay,
We would call them and they would give us the last registered information.
so they would give you that?
They would.
Okay,
But let's say you move and you get a new cell phone number or a new address. When you call to update it, then they're gonna hit you with the, oh,
Okay.
we need you to pay that membership fee. So you can kind of skate by not doing it until you need to update the registration, and then they're gonna want you to pay a membership fee to update.
thank you.
I was just wondering, there used to be a big problem in a university town like this when the end of school happens and then all these animals that are left behind by students. Does that still happen? Or not so much?
We'll see a few animals come in at the end of semesters, but one thing that I've learned over the years is that irresponsible pet ownership isn't age specific. I've met people of all walks of life, of all age ranges, that I'm like, you cannot do that with your animals. So I don't feel like we see it at the shelter, but I do wonder if the U of I campus maybe does, because they do have a cat problem there, and I don't know if it's from students or if it's just from feral cats that are just repopulating. And so that, it's really hard to know where strays actually come from. I know out in the county, I've heard several times people think that students take their cats out to the county and dump them, which is definitely a possibility, but it's really hard to know 100% that that's what's happening. But we've actually had some really great adopters that are college age who really blow me away with the animals that they'll take on, and they stand by them. So it's just one of those things I think students kind of get a bad rap, but you know, sometimes they earn it and sometimes they don't. It just kind of depends on the individual, I think.
I've heard there's programs where they bring shelter animals into prisons as part of prisoners' rehabilitation.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if is people maybe convicted of minor crimes have to do community service? Are they working at the shelter?
So we do have court-appointed community service hours that we do, and we do those in the morning before we're open, while we're cleaning. And so a lot of times, people who have mandated community service, they help us with the cleaning and the upkeep, but they don't really get to interact with the animals as much as our other volunteers.
Is your spay and neuter program run in conjunction with the local veterinarians or with the veterinary school in Humane? How is that working?
So for our spay and neuter program, it's good at any Latah County vet, except for low-cost spay and neuter clinics. So most of the vets that I see turning in vouchers are usually the one in Palouse, does quite a few, and here locally in Moscow. But it has to be with a vet in Latah County.
And it's a voucher, so it doesn't cover the entire cost, but it
Correct.
covers, what would you say it covers? 50%, 75%?
So we don't do a percentage, but we do $50 towards a spay and $30 towards a neuter.
For both cats and dogs?
Yes.
I haven't had one done in a long time. What would you estimate at
Well,
one of the local clinics that might
Sure.
cover?
So it really does depend which clinic you go to. and the size of your pet. Let's say it's a male cat, it'll probably be, around $80 to get them neutered, so that would make it $50 for the owner to do so. Dogs, it's a little bit more tricky because it is based off of weight. For me, I adopted a dog that was on the waiting list to come into the shelter and took him to the vet to get him neutered, and he was a 100-pound dog, and so after I did the pre-procedure blood work and everything, it was $300, and I was thinking, why didn't I apply to help me with this? But, so the range is just so big, so that doesn't really answer your question.
Oh, that's okay. As somebody who is a spare no expense pet owner, I know how quickly those bills can add up. Do you see people coming into the shelter who just have to give up their pets because they can't afford the medical costs?
Yes.
And, what do you do? Like, if somebody brings in a sick animal because they can't afford to take care of them, I guess, what can you do?
So we step in and we make sure the animal gets the veterinary care they need. One of the hardships with this is that then a lot of times the people would like to adopt that animal back. But unfortunately, we have really great relationships with vets in the area where we get discounts, and we don't want to hinder the vets clinics that way. We don't want people to be taking advantage of our discounts. And so if an animal needs vet care that the owners can't provide, we do have them sign the animal over to us or owner surrender so we can get that care, and then we find them a home. One of the ways that we do this program is our Merlin Fund. We actually just had a kitty come in last week who is our newest recipient of this fund. It's all donation based, and it helps cover life-saving surgeries that otherwise we wouldn't be able to do. This kitty was found outside of Troy, and he had been attacked by an animal. He's a really nice cat. He's tame. He was somebody's cat at some point, and he needed to have his right leg completely amputated due to how bad the infection had gotten. So the people who found him brought him into a vet clinic and said, we can't afford to do a leg removal on a cat that isn't ours. He's a stray. We'll just euthanize him. And the vet clinic called us and said, hey, do you guys have anything in your Merlin Fund that we could use to get Buster back up and going? So he had his surgery, and he's back at the shelter, and will hopefully be able to be adopted in January. So we do have a fund that helps us with this. As long as the funds are there, we can do it.
Have all the cats that were out at Robinson Mobile Home Park been taken care of?
They have.
Neutered, fed, anything?
They have not. So we've been meeting with the county commissioners to see what is it we can do. Unfortunately, we don't have the funds to take on that by ourselves, and we don't have the space at the shelter. We take in about 300 cats a year, and there's really no good estimate how many cats are out there, but we're assuming it's in the hundreds. And so we can't, it puts everyone in a really unfortunate situation where if we did take that on, that would be it for 1 year. And so we're trying to work with the county commissioners to see how can we get some funding to at least do a TNR program out there. And the shelter's been applying for grants to see if we can hopefully secure some kind of funding to help us go out there and help in some way.
And TNR means?
Trap, neuter, and release.
Can you explain a little bit about the nuances of what you can and can't do with feral cats? What the law says you can and can't do with feral cats?
So feral cats are very tricky. It's really hard to know exactly who's responsible for a feral cat. According to the state of Idaho, it's the property owner. So when there's situations like what's happening out at Robson Trailer Court, the property owner, we can't go trap without their permission. And we have yet to be able to contact the property owner. So it really kind of hangs us up where if a cat is on own property and we don't have permission, we cannot set a trap. So there are ways we can. So if law enforcement went out there and said, no, we're gonna start a case, you can get involved. But as a humane society, we don't have the authority to take it upon ourselves and say, this area needs help, we're gonna go do it, and not have legal repercussions. So, and the county commissioners are also kind of in the same boat as it's the property owners. We need to get them on board too so we can really start doing something.
So as soon as the county commissioners take responsibility for it, then they're gonna be responsible for everything.
Right.
I mean, that's a slippery slope
It
for
is,
them.
it is, especially with Lake County, there's no regulations on cats. So you can have as many cats as you want, they don't have to be fixed. You can have 50 cats, your neighbor could see it and say, this isn't right, but because there's no laws against it, there's no legal repercussions, there's no way to really go in and say, we need to do something about this. I talked with the state veterinarian, and he said, you know, if law enforcement goes and they see a deceased animal, it's a lot easier to get in there and do something, but then you run into, if law enforcement goes in, then the county of that law enforcement has to cover the fees. So it's really difficult in an area where there isn't a lot of excess funding for the county, where they're gonna pull funds from for something that is seen as a property owner's issue and not a county issue.